Hello, this is Paolo, and in this video I'm going to show you how to use volumes to create beams of light like the ones you see in stage productions. When we see beams of light in the real world, that is because there are particles in the atmosphere that cause the light to be scattered. Those particles can be dust or fog, for example, and they act like tiny little mirrors that continuously shift and move. To recreate that effect with Reality and Lux, we are going to use volumes. Volumes are special entities in Lux Render that create scattering of light. So what we need to do is to create a container for the volume. To do that, we are going to use the cube low poly. I use the cube low poly instead of the standard cube that we can see below here, the box. Because the box is actually subdivided multiple times. It has a lot of polygons. We don't need many polygons. We just need one polygon per face. So the cube low poly is exactly 6 polygons, and that works perfectly for us. So I'm gonna just double click on it and bring in the scene. Gonna move the library out of the way. So we drop this on the floor, and now we need to resize it. Let me start with 500%. Looks pretty good. I'm gonna switch to the auxiliary camera, and we can just move it around a little bit. Dropping on the floor again, Command D, Control D. Switch back to the main camera. Well, it's a big gray area, not very useful the way it is now. So let's go back to the auxiliary camera. What we need to do here is to change the visibility of this cube slightly. So with the cube selected, I'm gonna go to Display, Element Style, and select wireframe. So now we can see through the cube, and this is vital because if we don't see inside the cube, we cannot position our light correctly. So the next thing is, let me see if maybe I need to resize it down a little bit, like this. So the next thing is to add a spotlight. Those beams of light that we see in stage productions are created by spotlights. So let's try to use a spotlight. I'm gonna add a new light, and this is pretty much where I want it. Now let me just move around a little bit. Yeah, this is pretty good. The only factor here is the light is way too wide. This is creating a big fan. It's like when people turn on the headlights in the fog. It just blinds you. Not what we wanted. So with the light selected, I'm gonna go here in the angle end and change it from 70 to 15. Oh, this is much better. Yep. This is exactly how I wanted it. Well, let's take a look at the scene from the main camera, the camera that we are gonna use to render. Okay. Yeah, that could be good. That could be good. Let's make sure that the cube is dropped on the floor. Okay. And now, well, now it's time to see how the magic happens in Reality. So we are going to go to the Render, Reality Render Editor. And here we are in Reality. We are going to go to the, not Materials, but to the Volumes tab. We talked about how the scattering is created by volumes. So we need to create a new volume. Here we have the air volume that is created automatically by Reality. It's always here. It's basically the atmosphere around our scene. We don't care about this for now. We are going to just add a new volume. And we are going to change the name of this to fog. It can be anything, but I'm going to just call it fog. We are going to leave the parameters as they are, but we need to click on Scattered so that this volume is actually scattering the light. Now, the scattering is controlled by this color. This is technically an RGB color, but it is actually a value that indicates how much scattering we want. And the brighter the color, the more scattering we get. This parameter causes big changes with small increments. So it is really important that we go easy in changing the values for this. So I'm going to click on this. And this is pretty much where we need it. This causes already a good amount of scattering. If we look at the RGB values, let me go here and RGB sliders, 14, 14, 14. This is pretty much where I want it. So let's confirm it. And now we need to tell Reality how to use this volume. If we go to the Materials tab and we look at the cube, well, the cube is defined by default as using the glossy material. Now, I don't want to see a glossy cube in my scene. I don't want to see a cube at all. So, how do we do that? I could hide it, but then we don't see anything. We don't see the volume. What we need to do is to right-click on this material and convert it to null. Null is a material that does nothing. It's completely transparent. But the important characteristic of this is that the geometry will be exported. So the cube will be physically in the scene. It will be just completely transparent, which is exactly what we need, because now we go in the volumes tab of this cube and we tell Reality that inside the inner volume, inside this cube has fog. This is the trick. So basically Reality will export a cube. The cube will exist, will be able to contain a fog volume, but the cube will be completely transparent outside. So now we can go to render and see if it works. I'm going to just reduce the size of the render a little bit so that fits inside this low resolution for this video. We need to turn off one light. I use an infinite light in the scene to see the scene, so I'm going to just turn it off. Click on this. Oh, and I see that, well, the parameter didn't come through. Sometimes it happens, so we are going to just enter the same cone angle. And what I want to do is to use the color temperature for my color model. I don't want to use RGB. RGB is used by default in converting poser lights because poser lights come through with a color. You can see the gray here. So Reality respects what poser passes as values. It doesn't take decision on its own, but it's better if we use a color temperature. It's more natural. So with this set, we're going to go to render frame. There you go. We can immediately see this is a beam of light. Isn't that glorious? It's fantastic. Now we can do another thing. For example, the autolinear kernel, the tone mapper, automatically adjusts the exposure. This is not always the best. So what I can do is to go to linear and set my shutter speed, for example, 1/4 of a second. And this is actually much nicer. Now, see these large halo around? This is caused by the cone feathering. And we can change that. So I can go to Reality and in the Lights tab, I can click on my light, on my spotlight. And here the default is a feather of 5 degrees. Well, let's turn into a feather of 1 degree. See how that works. We can immediately see that we have a nice sharper circle, still with a little bit of a feather edge, just a tiny bit, which is really nice. And again, we can change our exposure. Isn't that just wonderful? And this is how you use volumes to create beams of light. Happy rendering!